Steve, I'm hoping you could maybe help me with a little bit of your expertise on the hydration front. Coming from the fields, we're hearing, stay hydrated, drink water, not really any advice on what to do. And like my time during the field, we would take a break, I'd pound a bottle of water, and we'd go back to work. What's your advice?
Yeah, I think one of the first myths is when you're feeling thirsty, okay, now it's time to start hydrating. And typically, when you're feeling thirsty, you're already about 1 to 2% dehydrated. People don't usually don't think about it that way. 1 to 2% may not sound like a lot, but that can actually, equal about a 10% like reduction in cognitive function and physical output. Basically saying that 10%, I'm like not as sharp, not as focused, a little slower to like recognize hazards and react. And then also just I fatigue a little bit quicker, maybe not quite as physically strong as I normally would be. Just from that, hey, I'm waiting until I'm thirsty before I start drinking water. So obviously, the advice and protocol is simple. It's if I'm working in the heat, let's now plan ahead 2 to 3 hours before my shift starts to start hydrating and drinking water. It should probably start the night before, but at least I wake up in the morning, let's get that 16 to 20 ounce bottle of water. Electrolytes also play a really big role because I think that's another myth too, right? People think, okay, I am working in the heat. I'm just going to pound a bunch of water, just water by itself, and that's going to be enough. But when you sweat, you lose more than just water, right? You lose electrolytes, sodium, potassium. So that's where electrolytes need to play into it too. Water by itself is not enough when working in the heat, especially if it's a shift or a job that lasts longer than 2 hours out in the heat. Like electrolytes need to happen for sure.
When do you think we should start with the electrolytes?
Oh, I would start once again 2 3 hours before your shift, right? So if hey, today it's going to be hot outside, I'm going to be outside all day. Like when I get that bottle of water and I crack it open first thing in the morning, I'm already dumping electrolytes into there. I'm starting with that. That should probably happen 2 to 3 hours before I start my shift, right? So on the way to work, I'm drinking that, right? I'm making sure that I at least have that in my system to start.
Once you go too far, meaning you're not doing the hydration and the electrolytes and you're now at work and you're in danger zone or you're getting to that space, can you come back from that, or once you're gone, it's too far?
There's always stuff that you can do, right? First off is making sure that you're aware of signs of what heat illness and heat stroke could be, right? Aware of yourself and the crew you're working with, be aware of that to when we need to pull somebody, out of the job into a cool environment. But when you start to feel yourself, getting dehydrated, there are some things that you can do right away. Like I think the first one to do is, get out of the heat and get into a cooler environment. The shade can be important, but sometimes we need more than that. Sometimes hopping in the truck and cranking the AC can be at least a first step, right? Mm-hmm. Definitely taking off the PPE that might be a little restrictive or trapping heat. So like when possible, off the job, in the truck, can I take off some of that PPE for a little bit?
And what are the signs? How do we know?
Oh, well, yeah, there can be a lot of signs. Obviously, we talked about, when you're thirsty, you're already behind. So you want to stay ahead of that.
Yeah.
But it's sometimes it's like that confusion, slow to react, sometimes a little slow to speak, right? I definitely feel the fatigue physically. My strength is another big one. They talked about like when you're dehydrated, you can definitely have like loss of grip strength. So if normally I'm gripping something, all of a sudden I'm like, well, it's a little bit harder to grip and I'm working in the heat, that can be a sign of it. I know that a lot of people are familiar with like the finger tap test. That can be one. It can be where, you're tapping your fingers. And if it's harder to do that or you're taking longer than normal, that means that we're starting to get a little bit of that cognitive decline due to the heat. I think another one too is like, when I'm done with my shift, that like, okay, I'm good. And we talk about this, right? Like hydration and staying properly hydrated is not reactive. It should be proactive. So that means, yes, before my shift, am I drinking water, but also the night before. Like I want to plan ahead. So if my shift is done and I've cooled down and I feel like I'm in a good spot, we still need to hydrate at the end of the day too. And that just might mean like, hey, I'm just drinking another bottle of water just the next 2 to 3 hours after my shift, thinking about the next day.
So, Steve, maybe not knowing what the guys are doing the night before or how they showed up, do you think at our job briefing, I could just have everybody just pound a bottle of water and then on a break, have them pound another bottle of water? Or how would you approach this?
Yeah, I definitely think that's common, right? Like, okay, we get some time. We're just going to chug a couple bottles of water and then think we're good. And then for the next 3-4 hours, probably not even touch water because we're so focused on the job. Chugging water alone, it isn't enough. It's not going to work, right? Your body's not able to absorb all of it when we're just chugging like that. It needs to be kind of more of a sipping approach. Ideally, it should be like, hey, every 20 minutes, we're sipping some water. There are some equations to kind of help figure that out. Like I think taking your body weight and dividing it by 30 gives you a good kind of ounce recommendation. So like if I'm 210 pounds, divided by 30 is 7. That's how many ounces roughly every 20 minutes we should try to be getting. One thing too, like I think it's also the choices. You brought this up, the choices that we make the night before or even the morning of. Like we want to think about that as well too. And I think morning of is a great example because I know caffeine fuels a lot of people. I mean, it fuels me. I had some coffee before I came here. Most of us did, right? But caffeine is a diuretic. So it will take water and pull it out of your body. So if you already know you're going to be up against the heat all day, which will be pulling water out of your body now, if I drink a bunch of caffeine to start my day, I'm also starting behind the 8 ball a little bit more too, right?
So, Steve, after the shift, any suggestions on best way to recover?
Yeah, I mean, that's really the most important time is as soon as that shift is done, I'm already thinking about what I can do to recover because the next day, I'm going to be back on the job site, probably back in the heat, right? When you're working in the heat, it can exhaust and tax your muscles. And that's just because, when we go to sweat, the body takes the blood from the muscles and it sends it to the skin to help me vent and help me sweat. That means that my muscles have less oxygen-rich blood to them. So the muscles fatigue faster. They get real stiff, can lead to muscle cramping and even a higher risk of an injury. So your muscles can be really exhausted. And also the body will take moisture from your joints because your body's trying to steal moisture from wherever it can, right? And it'll pull moisture from your joints. So when you get off a shift, sometimes your joints are stiff. They're tight, like it has kind of that reduced shock absorption in your joints. So they become very stiff and tight, a little immobile, obviously at a high risk of injury. So the idea is, okay, I need to recover not just from a hydration standpoint, but my muscles and my joints. There's lots of different ways to do that. Obviously, sleep is really important. You got to prioritize sleep. And you mentioned earlier, like the choices the guys make outside of a shift. Like you got to make sure, like sleep is definitely high on that list of like prioritizing that, right? Getting to bed at a good time when I have to get up, trying to reduce those distractions, trying to reduce caffeine late in the day, those kinds of things. But also like, what am I doing from a movement perspective, right? Like there's a lot of movement we can do from the recovery side, whether it's doing some soft tissue release with like a foam roller or a massage roller. Like let's get those muscles, like let's loosen up some of the stiffness, the tightness in those muscles from the workday while I'm hydrating, right? And then just some light, honestly, stretching or like static or dynamic kind of stretching, because that'll help the muscles, but also those joints a little bit, just kind of regain some of that mobility.
I just don't think that we have the real guidance on the easy steps because right now it's just like a cognitive overload. So, Steve, if you could just break it down to the simplest steps of how do I recover?
Yeah, because it seems like a lot, right? But it doesn't have to be. I mean, it can be as little as 10 to 15 minutes kind of in your like evening routine. That's very strategic, right? Like I'm doing some strategic rolling. Like I said, it could be a foam roller, massage roller for 5 minutes. And then it could be like 4 to 5, movements that are very targeted to loosen up those tight areas for the day. Another one is breathing. Doing some belly breathing just helps calm everything down in the body and that can help speed up that recovery process. So, I mean, it really doesn't have to be a lot. It could be 10 to 15 minutes of your evening routine, kind of while you're watching TV, right? Or something like that.
A lot of times, the company, they tell you to drink the water and everything. We're in a environment where like, what's in it for me? So what's in it for me to to hydrate and to roll out and to do these movements or what's the consequences?
Well, yeah, I think first off, working in a hot, humid environment, obviously we talked about it. It can be really, really difficult mentally and physically. Dehydration can set in before you even know it, right? And when you are dehydrated, your blood, it's kind of interesting. It gets very, very thick, kind of like old sludgy engine oil, which means your heart has to work like substantially harder to pump that blood through your body. So right there, your body's having to work hard just to get the blood moving. Then you add in all the physical nature of the work on top of it as well, too. So that's a big reason why, yes, we can feel it from a physical standpoint, but also mentally. Because now it's much harder to focus. It's much harder to like stay concentrated on the job and identify hazards. And that's a big one, right? Because every little bit we're distracted from that can put us and our crews at a higher risk of an accident or injury, right? So that's why it's so important to try to stay ahead of this game. We talked about hydration. Nutrition plays a really big role into it as well, too. I know, there's guys that will skip breakfast or sometimes skip lunch. I've talked to crews before that didn't eat at all the entire day, right? Until dinner time. And it's like, Or I've also talked to people that eat a giant breakfast burrito on the way in from the gas station, right? And it's like making those choices can also put us behind the eight ball even more when we're working in the heat. So like, okay, what's a good general recommendation? It definitely would be thinking about in the morning, we're not skipping breakfast, but we're having something that's easy to digest. That could be like lean proteins, some complex carbohydrates, oatmeal, trail mix, stuff like that, and some fruits. Like that can be a good start. But then planning throughout your day. How am I getting this kind of stuff throughout the day? It could be simple. It's just like bringing snacks with me, right? And making good choices when I go to lunch. Try to skip the fast food. Because when we're eating the stuff like that that's very calorically dense or a lot of fat, it's just harder for my body to digest. It's just more for my body to have to do. Your body's already, trying to battle the heat and the physical nature of the work. Let's set your body up for success, right? Another thing with recovery, it's all about sleep, right? We know that we should get sleep to help recover. A lot of people have heard that before. And I think we've heard we should get 8 hours sleep, right? That's in a dream scenario. It's not always feasible for everybody because sometimes there's long shifts or on storm response, right? So sometimes like maybe not getting quite 8 hours is, possible, but 6 to 7 hours has got to happen. Like we got to find ways to make that happen. And we have to find ways to make that the highest quality sleep. Because when you are sleeping, that is when your body is repairing physically and mentally for the next day. So we need to prioritize that. And it needs to be something that we are looking at, making sure it's top of mind. So can I get to bed a little bit earlier? Can I eliminate distractions before bed, like our phones or screens? Like that's a good, can I just half an hour before bed put that stuff away to help get me to sleep? Practicing some deep breathing if I'm having trouble falling asleep can be a really good way to do that as well too. Obviously, you get into the heat months, the hot months in the summer, it gets darker much later. I mean, up here where we live, sometimes it's 9:30, 10 o'clock before it gets dark. So sometimes we're out doing something. Maybe it's activities, maybe it's a barbecue, maybe I'm at a kid's game or practice, and it can get to be really, really late. So just trying to keeping that in mind that I'm already up against these things. So how do I make sure I get to sleep? And how do I make sure I prioritize falling to sleep? We obviously, if it's on a weekend, it's on a Sunday or Saturday, we might be going to a barbecue and, having a few alcoholic beverages, right? No harm in that, but just knowing what that does to the body. It is a diuretic. It does pull water out of the body and it can directly affect sleep. Alcohol consumption can make it harder to fall asleep and stay asleep. So it's just knowing those things and making sure maybe I know when I want to cut it off, when I want to stop, and then drinking water also why maybe I'm consuming those beverages would be a smart plan.